very concerned about the character knocks and the off-the-field knocks. Third round, very different than the first round when you look at it from a Patriot perspective.
Yeah, I think they took advantage of people sort of looking at this year differently in the draft, drafting specifically for various areas. I think when we look back and evaluate this 2011 draft, we have to look at it with an eye on, A, what they spent, and B, then look at what position some of these teams that may have been criticized for not drafting a guy like Ryan Mallett in the second round or at the end of the first round or making a deal to move up. This kid can play, and imagine if you're a young quarterback. It's like being a young broadcaster. Let's see, the first couple of years as you try to break into the Major League Baseball level, you're just going to be able to follow around Vince Scully and just model yourself after what he does. That's the advantage a backup has here.
Following around Tom Brady, you learn, obviously, what makes him tick, and you appreciate his work ethic, and obviously a good thing for you as you move on in your career. Chris in Detroit, Randy, is next here on Sirius XM NFL Radio.
What's up, guys? How are we doing today?
Warm it up, Chris.
Hey, just curious, how is Stephen Gostkowski looking? I know, he got injured last year. Is his leg strength back? Is he 100%?
Allegedly, yes. We'll give you a much better idea here in a little bit. We'll be up on the red level looking out at practice.
Which is at 1:30 today.
Which starts at 1:30. I can't wait to just get your sort of impressions, because you're going to see football from a quarterback / O-lineman's view, because everything you're going to see is going to be through the end zones.
I'm excited for this.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot about this view and how cool it is. I'm really excited to watch practice. We're going to move our location. We're in the bowels of the stadium right now where the players are coming in and coach is going to come in and we're doing the interviews. And then we're going to move to this location where we can see practice. I can't wait for it later today, Randy.
Yeah, it's exciting. You're able to actually look at the kickers. You'll be able to see them punt, see them kick. So we'll give a much better impression of Gostkowski. But, man, that kid's got one heck of a leg. And you figure, look at Adam Vinatieri. It's not like he's sort of went out of here and isn't really still doing some great stuff.
Sure.
But, Patriots found a guy, and they went with what they thought to be long-term and short-term, a better kicker. And this kid has been money.
You like the Patriots special teams going into this season?
That's always the sort of the catch-22 on roster decisions. And this year, as we discuss more defensive line on the roster, that impacts your special teams, because they're just not special teams contributors. That means less linebackers and possibly less DBs, less special teams contributors. It's going to put more pressure on backup receivers, backup running backs, and the whatnot, and the guys that do play. They're going to be asked to have a bigger role, I think, in special teams. To me, it's one of the more interesting parts of the game for them.
Nobody loves Aaron Rodgers more than I do. No one respects Peyton Manning more than I do. I still view Tom Brady as the elite quarterback in the NFL. And as we mentioned to start the show, it sounds simplistic, but I firmly believe it. You have Brady, you have Belichick, get a great chance to go to the Super Bowl and win it. Talking to the guys and talking to people off air and on air, you just get the sense, coming off of an injury, Brady's as good as he's ever been. And I think this passing attack with the weapons they have, and I think an offensive line that's going to play better than what it did last year, certainly what it showed against the Jets in the playoff game. I think Tom Brady's going to have another eye-popping season at quarterback for the New England Patriots.
Well, the common traits that he shares with every quarterback you want to label with that great placard around his neck has two things to me, and you work with one of the great winners at quarterback and Rich Gannon on a regular basis. But Brady has accuracy, and he had, which is the placement of the ball, which is unbelievable. And he also has the ability to throw what he needs to throw, and it sounds like an ambiguous term, but you run that by Rich. Is it the lob over in the seam?
Right.
Is it the foot off the ground drilled as the in pass? Is it that ball to the back shoulder? They've all got that, and it's got nothing to do with arm strength. It's all timing.
You think that the transition for Chad in terms of a rapport and chemistry with Tom Brady, it's going to be a work in progress, it's going to be seamless? What's your take on that, especially with how rushed everything is with the work stoppage?
Given that passion I was talking about earlier in the first hour that Chad has for the game, I wouldn't anticipate it being that big of a deal. It'll be a transition. It'll be an adjustment, because just like we talk about the standards and the way you do your job, excuse me, in this building is, for a receiver, their job is all based on how many yards down the field, how quickly you are out of your break, and being exactly where the quarterback knows you can be every time. How many times did you hear about Roy Williams not being where Tony Romo could trust he was going to be?
Exactly.
And why would he be so different going into Mike Martz's offense in Chicago? I have a hard time believing it personally.
I don't think he can change.
But no. I think that passion is going to make Chad be more of an attention to detail type of receiver and be exactly where Brady, either that or he just won't throw him the ball.
Right, because that's Tom. I mean, he'll find the guy who his favorite receiver is the open receiver. He's not looking at a guy's number or not looking at the name on the back of the jersey. The guy who's open, that's who's getting the football.
Yeah, you look at the options they have in this offense, and I know those quarterbacks would love to have that kind of selection to throw to and the diversity of talent that they throw to. And their diversity at the receiver positions, running back, tight end, wide receiver, I think speaks to the diversity of this league from a defensive standpoint because it enables them to change and adjust on a week-to-week basis.
Well, and I mentioned that to Danny Woodhead. I mean, that to me is what makes this team so incredible and so unique. The pressure, Randy, that they can put on a defense, even these great defenses and elite defenses in the AFC. I mean, you look at the weapons that they could line up at any given time. I mean, it's what makes the New England Patriots just a threat for the Super Bowl.
Well, and you're facing a Jets defense. You're facing a Ravens defense. You're facing the Steelers. Their hope is to get you off your timing because these wonderful offenses we've seen, whether it's Indy, whether it's here, whether it's Green Bay, whether it's Atlanta when Matt Ryan's got his bounce working, they're all based on timing. And every defensive attack is based on two things. One is disrupting that timing, and two is disrupting the signal going out of the quarterback's head. They want to get after that quarterback at all costs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you analyze it. This offense is, something superb and something special. And, the one thing I think you'd want to improve on and tweak is, what we talked about earlier in the show and talked to Ben Jarvis Green Ellis about, I think you want that presence at the running back position to close out ball games for the New England Patriots. Not even so much earlier this season, but in December, and most especially, Randy, in January.
Yeah, and it's something I learned a long time ago from Bill Belichick, being around him, because he's one of those football hardcore guys that could never understand why TV's so obsessed with starting lineups.
Right.
And we were in a production meeting years ago for a game during the regular season, and Bill looked over at me after he kind of answered, sort of stiff-armed a question about the starting lineup. He looked at me and goes, why don't you put the lineup I want to be in for the last 4 minutes of the game? He goes, because the lineup I'm in at the end of the game is much more important than the lineup I start the game in.
Wow, good anecdote.
Because if I finish the game in two tight ends and a fullback, you got a serious problem. Now, if I finish the game in four wides, my offensive line's got a serious problem. He goes, that lineup's more important, isn't it? And I said, well, in your world, yeah, you're right.
And it is interesting when you look at New England. I mean, they can do so many different things on offense. The two tight end sets. You talked about what Solder can bring to the table and specific goal line and red zone packages. The different wide receivers who put pressure on a defense. The one thing I just want to see out of that team in terms of taking that next step is the ability, that clock-killing Corey Dillon kind of guy. Maybe it's one of the rookies. Maybe it's Ben Jarvis Green Ellis. That's the one, I think, missing ingredient for this otherwise powerful offense.
Yeah, and so much of this game has morphed and changed where there's less emphasis on the vertical down the field or even the vertical off the ground and on the horizontal when it comes to the offensive side of the ball. That even when you're in those up positions, you've almost got to be, it's incumbent upon you to still be presenting the look of at least being able to flip that ball around there and throw it. I'm not sure if the old days of the two tight ends and the fullback are kind of gone unless you're up by 10 or 15 points and you're really big time protecting your lead.
We compared the Patriot defense to the Jets, to the Ravens, to the Chargers, to the Steelers earlier in the show. When you compare the offenses of these teams and you look at the landscape of the AFC, I think you got to get out of the conference before you start talking Super Bowl. I do think the Patriots have the elite offense going into the season, at least, Randy, when you look at the AFC.
The one thing that I think is in short supply on the AFC side as we speak right now for a lot of the teams is the home field advantage. Because we've seen the Patriots lose here. We've seen the Colts lose on that turf, on that field there. We've seen the Chargers lose in San Diego. Every elite-type team or potentially elite-type team, there's not that much. Now, the Pittsburgh Steelers.
That's the one exception.
That's one that I would say that's a home field advantage. And the Jets. That new Meadowlands Stadium, I think, for the Jets is a huge advantage. The trick is, how the heck do you get a game there?
Well, that's the
How many
whole thing.
games you got to win to get a home game?
I mean, listen, and being at Jets camp on Friday, that's the big talk there. If we're going to ultimately, from a Jet perspective, get to the Super Bowl, you got to win a division because you want to buy, hopefully, from their standpoint.
Yeah.
And you want a home playoff game at the new Meadowlands.
Yeah, and then how do you respond to the Packer fans out there that say, well, you know, that buy thing's kind of overrated?
And the home field thing is kind of overrated.
We worked on our mojo in the wild card round. We perfected our attack against Atlanta in the divisional round. We got it going in Chicago in the championship game for the NFC, and sort of became who we were the next 2 weeks later there in Dallas. There's so many ways to do it. The easiest way, allegedly, is home field advantage, but I don't know. I've seen too many examples of late. It's being that team that's on that just cold-blooded roll at the end of the year.
And I'm still stunned by what happened last 2 times there have been home playoff games for the New England Patriots. That's still, Randy. I mean, honestly, I still, whether it's Ray Rice's run or Sean Ellis getting to the quarterback, I still actually can't believe what transpired last 2 times there were playoff games inside the stadium.
Well, and this is not to slight either team, but it's the lowest common denominator. And it's one of those things, if I'm fighting you, I'm going to stick this direct left jab right between your eyes. And if you don't stop me, I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what both teams did.
You're right.
Very tough, very physical, didn't have to stop doing what they were doing.
No. And let's be honest, whether it was running the ball or playing that style of defense, they just kept after it. And it obviously worked. And I think, you know, I appreciated what McCourty and Chung said. It was the one time, I think, during that entertaining interview where they kind of went into Patriots speak, where they said, okay, you know, that game is left behind, as opposed to maybe, you know, Ravens players who are still using last year against Pittsburgh. We talked them in the offseason as a motivational tool. I got to believe that last year really stung for this group in New England.
Yeah, especially the way it went down the last 2 years. Because you live for those moments, and the fact that when I get in those big moments, I'm going to execute, and I am just going to be crazy good. And look back at Peyton Manning's drive against New Orleans 2 years ago in the Super Bowl. Look at Ben Roethlisberger in the recent Super Bowl against Green Bay. I mean, everyone that you've got a crazy good opportunity that wasn't paid off. And it didn't make them bad players. It just tells you how elusive that level of play is.
Yeah, absolutely. So Bill Belichick is going to be joining us live in a couple of minutes as a broadcast live from New England Patriots training camp. Adam Shine, Randy Cross, Sirius XM Blitz here on Sirius XM NFL Radio, and I am fascinated to talk to Coach about, you know, this revamped defense and most especially the 2 big names and big personalities that they brought in Chad Ochocinco and Albert Haynesworth.
Yeah, and people look at it as this huge risk and this gigantic, out-of-the-box thinking. These guys are always trying to get better. They're no different than what Andy Reid and Joe Banner and them did in Philly. They recognize a weakness, and they try to find the best player available to plug that into that weakness. You want to be big. You want a big physical presence out inside at defensive tackle that can rush the passer. Well, who was available? That potentially, that French word from not worth a dang yet, potentially could do that was out there. And you can't go wrong with Albert if he's properly motivated. You know he's going to be properly coached and motivated with a guy like Pepper Johnson as his day-to-day contact and Bill.
Well, Pepper Johnson, to me, in addition to Bill, is a huge part of this. I mean, you know, you look at Jim Washburn, he maximized Albert Haynesworth, and I think Pepper Johnson has obviously been there and done that as a player and a coach. I think that's going to be huge for the rapid, and it better be rapid, development of Albert Haynesworth playing for the New England Patriots.
Yeah, you know, and you may not see it this Thursday night against Jacksonville. You may not see it the following Thursday night against Tampa. You could see flashes of it in Week 3.